If we're going to break down this story into chunks, I would like to offer this suggestion. As we think through the flow of the story to try to describe the whole entire story of the Bible in one paragraph or something like that, I think this is what it might look like. And obviously this framework is simply a suggestion. One could come up with other configurations. In fact, N.T. Wright has one that I think is helpful. He offers what he calls a 5-act hermeneutic, which consists of viewing the Bible as a drama that consists of different acts within the play or drama. And he designates these 5 acts as creation, fall, Israel, Jesus, and the church. And then he offers a 6th act in the play, which is still yet to come, and that is new creation. And if I were going to chunk the story of the Bible into something that is easily understood and communicated to others, I would offer it as 4 major chunks. And just for simplicity's sake, I think of them as God in creation, God in covenant, God in new covenant, and God in new creation. And of course, God in creation is the story that happens in the first few pages of the Bible, Genesis 1 through 3, the story of God being the creator of all things, and that God makes man in his image. And that's a rich metaphor that has lots of meaning of what does it mean to be made in God's image. I believe one of the things it primarily means is that we are made in his image to rule and create alongside him. And then obviously you have the story of the fall there in Genesis 3, where man rebels against God and wants autonomy and wants to redefine good and evil for himself, for herself, that they don't want to reign with God, but they want to reign autonomous from God. And then of course the next major movement in the story is God and his covenant, which is Genesis 4 roughly through the end of the Old Testament, the book of Malachi. And this is a story of God's love for his rebellious children, how God calls people to be his spokesperson, the prophets, to call people back into covenant relationship with himself. And of course, this is the largest portion of the Bible. This is the largest section or act of the Bible, and that is that God and his covenant, you see this story, this cyclical nature of God calling, lovingly trying to work with his people to stay in and come back to this covenantal relationship with him, and yet the people rebel over and over again. It's really just a recycling of the story of Genesis 3 in numerous ways. And then you have the pinnacle of this story, or the pinnacle character of the story, Jesus, show up on the scene and continue this story forward. And this is the story of God in new covenant, that Jesus would bring this new covenantal relationship with humanity and God. Like the prophets of the Old Testament, like Ezekiel foretold that God was going to remove the heart of stone and replace it with a heart of flesh through the power of his Spirit. This is now God and his new covenant, where God sends his Son to fulfill his righteousness, who perfectly lives in covenantal faithfulness to God and pays our penalty for our sins and rebellion. And God raises Jesus from the dead to usher in this new creation. And then there's this overlap in Matthew through Revelation that leads us into the next chunk, if you will, God and new creation, where it's a story about humans embracing or not this reconciliation, where Christians are awaiting the hope of salvation, the completion of the new creation, the resurrection from the dead, and the reconciliation of all things.